Good day. My name is Davon and today I'm presenting a negotiation case study on one of the most consequential conflicts in the music industry history, Prince versus Warner Brothers Records. This is not just a story about one artist and one label. It is a case study in leveraging artistic identity, power, dynamics, and what happens when underlying interests go unaddressed for nearly 2 decades. We will examine the bargaining position of both parties, uncover their underlying interests, analyze 3 core negotiation concepts at play, assessing what went well and what went wrong in the process, and elevate whether the 2014 resolution laid the foundation for a meaningful, long-term relationship. Prince Rogers Nelson signed with Warner Brothers Records in 1978 at just the age of 18 years old. Over the next 14 years, he became one of the most commercially successful artists in the world, with Purple Rain making him the first artist in history to simultaneously hold the #1 film, album, and single in the United States. In 1992, Prince re-signed with Warner, with the deal publicly announced as a $100 million contract, reportedly the largest in music history at the time. The contract covered 6 albums at $10 million per album, with a 25% royalty rate. But here's where the conflict ignited. What was being negotiated was more than money. At its core, this dispute was about 3 things: ownership of Prince master recordings, creative control over the release timeline and sequencing of his music, and ultimately his artistic identity. Warner believed a controlled, strategic release schedule maximized commercial performance. Prince, a prolific artist who could record dozens of songs in a month, found that model suffocating. He wanted to release music when he felt it was ready, not when the label's marketing team decided the market was ready. When Warner refused to accelerate his release schedule, Prince publicly escalated the conflict. He changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol in 1993 and wrote the word slave on his cheek during performances and media appearances. The standoff lasted 18 years. Prince was finally released from his contract in 1996 and remained independent until 2014, when a new deal with Warner gave him what he had always wanted: his masters back. Let us break down the stated bargaining positions of each party, meaning what each side was openly demanding. Prince's bargaining position was clear and aggressive. He demanded the return of all master recordings from his Warner catalog. He refused to release new creative material until the contract terms were fundamentally negotiated. He changed his legal name in an attempt to challenge the contract's enforceability, since his name itself was the asset Warner believed it controlled. He took this protest public, writing "slave" on his face, framing the label as an institution of creative imprisonment, and he threatened to fulfill his contractual obligations by delivering low-effort vault recordings, essentially punishing Warner for refusing to negotiate. Warner's bargaining positions were equally firm. The label insisted Prince fulfill the 6-album contract as signed in 1992. It retained exclusive ownership of all master recordings in accordance with industry practice. It controlled release timing, arguing that market strategy required measured rollouts to maximize revenue, and it released the Black Album, material Prince himself had shelved without his full consent. Both sides were deeply entrenched. Neither was willing to move from their position without significant external pressure. Now, positions are what parties say they want. Interests are why they want it. The gap between position and interest is where negotiators either find solutions or get stuck for 18 years. Prince's underlying interests were rooted in identity and legacy. He famously said, "If you don't own your masters own you." For Prince, owning his catalog was not about royalties. It was about the fundamental belief that an artist who does not control their own creative output is creatively enslaved. He also wanted financial parity, noting that Michael Jackson and Madonna received more favorable treatment at Warner. And beyond his personal situation, Prince was waging a systematic battle, trying to inspire other artists to demand ownership and reform how labels treated black artists in particular. Warner's underlying interests tell a different story. The label had invested enormously in Prince and needed to recoup that investment through carefully managed commercial releases. More critically, by 2014, Warner had a legal problem. The 35-year copyright termination law was approaching. Under U.S. copyright law, creators can reclaim ownership of recordings made 35 years prior, and Prince's early catalog was entering that window. A court ruling in Prince's favor would set a precedent threatening every major label's catalog holding. Avoiding that precedent was arguably Warner's most powerful underlying interest driving the 2014 deal. Additionally, Warner had a strong commercial interest in the Purple Rain 30th anniversary, since remastered catalog releases are extremely profitable. Understanding these interests reveals why a deal was eventually possible. Both parties had much to gain from a mutually beneficial resolution despite 18 years of public hostility. 3 foundational negotiation concepts illuminate what was really happening in this dispute. The first is BATNA, or best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Prince's BATNA evolved significantly over time. Initially, it was weak. He had a binding contract and no legal escape. But as the years passed and his catalog approached the 35-year copyright termination threshold, this BATNA strengthened dramatically. He could potentially reclaim his masters through legal action without Warner's cooperation. Warner's BATNA was also unattractive. A high-profile court battle that risked setting industry-wide precedent and damaging the entire major label ecosystem. As both sides' BATNA became clear, the space for negotiation expanded. The second concept is leverage and power dynamics. Prince weaponized his public image in ways that went far beyond the negotiation table. Changing his name and writing slave on his face was not irrational behavior. It was a calculated, reputational strategy that turned the negotiation into a PR crisis for Warner, making the cost of an action dramatically higher for the label. This is a textbook example of using public pressure as an external leverage to shift power dynamics when one party holds structural advantages. The third concept is integrative bargaining. Rather than dividing a fixed pie, the 2014 deal demonstrated that both parties could expand the value available. Prince received ownership of his master recordings, his fundamental goal. Warner received 2 new Prince studio albums and a remastered Purple Rain Deluxe Edition, perfectly timed for the album's 30th anniversary. Both sides extracted significant value and, crucially, avoided the courtroom. This is the essence of integrative bargaining. Finding creative structures that simultaneously satisfy both parties' core interests. Let us be clear. We are analyzing the process here, not just the outcome. What went well in the process? Prince was remarkably consistent and strategic in building leverage over time. Rather than accepting his initial disadvantage, he systematically used every available tool, from public protests to name changes to contractual friction, to shift the power dynamic. That kind of deliberate, sustained approach to leverage building is genuine negotiation strength. And when both parties finally engaged seriously in 2014, they moved efficiently. When interests are understood and BATNAs are clear, deals can come together quickly and cleanly. What went wrong? The most significant failure was the absence of any effective early communication channel. Neither party established a back-channel dialogue before the conflict escalated into a full public standoff. Effective negotiation requires confidential spaces where parties can explore interests without losing face. And that mechanism was entirely absent here. Warner compounded the trust deficit by releasing the Black Album without Prince's genuine consent. A unilateral action that functionally destroyed the possibility of good faith negotiation for years. And both sides suffered for 18 years from a stalemate that a skilled mediator might have resolved far earlier. The cost of positional entrenchment was enormous and entirely avoidable. Was an agreement reached? Yes. In April 2014, Prince re-signed with Warner Brothers Records. The deal included Prince receiving full ownership and control of all master recordings from his Warner catalog. Warner received 2 new Prince studio albums and remastered the deluxe edition of Purple Rain for his 30th anniversary. Financial terms were not disclosed. Does this agreement foster a long-term meaningful relationship? Partially, but with important caveats. The deal was professionally successful. Both parties expressed satisfaction publicly. Warner chairman Cameron Strang expressed genuine enthusiasm. Prince himself said, "It's just a business relationship, clean and transparent, and I got my stuff back." He then publicly described record labels as outmoded, not exactly a ringing endorsement of deep partnership. The relationship was functional, not rational. Prince had always viewed record labels as distribution infrastructure rather than creative partners. His long-term vision was a full independence, and he achieved exactly that through his deal. Prince passed away in April 2016, less than 2 years after the agreement. But here is the deeper legacy that matters most. Prince's 2-decade fight permanently transformed how artists negotiate with major labels. Artists like Jay-Z, Taylor Swift, and Rihanna now routinely demand master ownership as a baseline condition. As a writer, Anil Dash observed, without Prince's public stand, that conversation develops more slowly across the entire industry. The negotiation's most profound impact was not what happened between Prince and Warner. It was what changed for every artist who came after. Thank you.